What's up guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of Bonsai-U. This time around we're going to be looking at the Sierra Juniper grafted with Kishu Shimpaku. All right, so over the last few years, as I've traveled around the world and worked with different types of trees from all over the planet, what I've come to find, in my opinion, is that the United States has some of the best yamadori or collected material in our mountains anywhere in the world. I think that our junipers in particular are top-notch, and we have a massive range of species that we can work with here in the United States. We've got, of course, the Rocky Mountain junipers, which have unbelievably beautiful striated deadwood. We've got one-seed junipers that have nice fluorescent green foliage and beautiful deadwood as well. And another species that we have here to work with in the States is the Sierra Juniper, which I have right here. Now, the Sierra Junipers are known for flaky deadwood, a little bit softer deadwood than some of the other junipers that we work with, and bright blue foliage. Now, I enjoy the foliage on Sierra Junipers for the most part, but again, like we've discussed in other episodes of Bonsai-U, you're going to find a spectrum from coarse to fine, even within that Sierra Juniper species range. So with this particular tree right here, the original owner of this tree, once it was collected, brought it back to his home, made sure that it survived collection, and he decided that the foliage on this tree was a little bit too coarse for the size of the plant, so he grafted it with Kishu Shimpaku. So again, as we discussed in previous episodes of Bonsai-U, Kishu Shimpaku originates from the WAKAYAMA area of Japan, which is sort of south of Osaka, right in the center of Japan. It's a nice, tight foliage, a little bit heavier than Itoigawa, for example, but it tends to be either blue to greenish color, so actually not that far off from the original Sierra Juniper, just a little bit tighter. And the growth on these trees, it stays quite balled up, so you can develop really nice full pads in a short amount of time. So the original grafts that were put on here were done via Eisei-en grafting, which would have been done in February or early March. So those grafts originally were put on, I guess, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 years ago. So you can see that the tree is now completely Kishu. Now there is one branch left over here on this side of the tree that still has some of that original Sierra on it. We're going to go ahead and cut that off. But before we do that, I wanted to show you what that looks like so you can see the contrast there. Now what I want to do in this edition of Bonsai-U is an initial styling on this tree. So we're going to take you through the process of cleaning the deadwood, choosing branches, wiring those branches, even changing the angle on the tree a little bit. And then next spring, we'll pot this guy up in a brand new container. So should be a pretty quick transformation. Looking forward to seeing what the final results of this tree are going to be. And I hope you guys are ready for the journey in this video. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so the first thing that I always do with a brand new piece of material like this is clean it out, clean the deadwood, clean the live tissue so that we can figure out where the delineation is between all of those things. And then that will dictate the angle of the tree, the new position of the plant, and the overall design of the tree as well. So for starters, what I'm going to do is clean up the live tissue on this tree. We're just going to be using a standard box cutter knife to remove some of that flaky bark on the externality of that live tissue, and then we'll take a nylon brush and maybe even a Dremel tool and clean up the rest of that so we get a nice bright red color. Now, depending on the juniper that you're working with, sometimes a live vein will turn bright red, sometimes it'll turn a darker brown color, sometimes it'll stay this grayish color. It just depends on that particular tree. I have a feeling with this tree we're going to be able to get a nice bright color, which is going to be great. And then when we do the actual deadwood cleaning, which is the second part of this, we'll be able to get that nice contrast between the red live vein and the white deadwood. So let's get on this first, and then we're going to take this bad boy outside and clean up the deadwood and paint it with lime sulfur. So this is what all of your junipers should look like once you've cleaned the deadwood, cleaned the live vein, and then painted that deadwood with lime sulfur. Now I use a mix of 50% water, 50% lime sulfur, and I do it while the deadwood is still slightly wet, or if it's bone dry, I'll take a spritzer, a water spritzer, and just go up and down the trunk with that to get it a little bit more moist. the lime sulfur will turn a bright white color almost instantaneously if you do that. So definitely keep that in mind. Now the next step with this tree is going to be to figure out what the front is and what the angle is going to be on the plant. So as you're viewing it right now, obviously there are a lot of flaws in the tree. The base is quite narrow. It then flares out, you get reverse taper, and then the tree kind of leans off to the side. It's also leaning way far to the back, so it's not really that interesting from this particular view. What I want to do is show off the fattest trunk possible, show off those new deadwood features within the tree so that you can really see those, and then try to create a picture frame around those areas with the foliage. So if we rotate this tree just a few degrees counterclockwise here, the base actually gets significantly larger down here, and the tree just has more interesting movement to it. The deadwood looks a little bit better here. It's not coming directly out towards you. It's off to the side and back a little bit more. And the nice thing here too is in the center of the tree, you start to expose this really cool deadwood down in this area. This is just a massive chunk of deadwood. As a matter of fact, there's a hole that goes all the way through the trunk. You'll actually see this quite often with Sierra Junipers up in the high elevation mountains out near Lake Tahoe, for example. They get a lot of snow in those areas. Snow compresses the trees. They actually split apart to survive. So you get these chunks of deadwood with live vein kind of wrapped around the outside, which is what we have here. We've got one live vein coming over the top, one coming underneath the bottom there, and then that chunk of deadwood in the center that's basically exploded out over time. So I want to show that really cool deadwood feature off. So having this as the front, I think, is going to do that. Now, that being said, the angle to the tree on is really not that interesting. I actually think it's going to look much better if we tilt the tree to the left and turn this into a bit more of a semi-cascade tree. So I'm going to set up some blocks underneath here and we'll see what that looks like. So I actually really like this new angle on the tree. I think it gives us a much more powerful sense at the base. Another cool thing down here too is that it gets some of that deadwood up and out of the soil. And as you guys know, if any deadwood is touching the soil line, that's the first place it's gonna rot because we're watering down there very frequently. So getting that up and out is definitely a good option. Another cool thing about this angle is that it gets this deadwood up and out as well, a little bit higher on the tree, so it's more prominent. And it's on a really nice angle out to the right side here. I'm looking to avoid creating perpendicular or parallel lines anywhere within the tree. So this nice outward angle here takes care of that for the deadwood. Additionally, here with this live vein, if we were to tilt this tree any further, this section of the live vein would actually become somewhat perpendicular at the base. But as we have it set now, it's on a slight angle back down towards the left there, which I think adds a little bit of character and interest to that area too. Now the next step here is going to be to figure out what we're going to cut off of this tree. When I'm working with a Kishu like this, I know that I can cut a ton of foliage off without having to worry about it going into juvenile or reverting to juvenile foliage or declining in health. So I could cut off easily 50–60% of the foliage on here without any worry. If this were something like an Itoigawa, for example, or a Rocky Mountain juniper, we'd have to be a little bit more concerned with cutting that much foliage off, particularly because it's going to revert to juvenile or spiky foliage, and then we have to wait 2 or 3 years to get it to revert back to this nice soft scale-like foliage, which is what we want on these trees. So with that in mind, I'm going to cut off the heavy branches on the tree so that we can work with just the soft growth. Obviously, that's going to be easier to wire and easier to manipulate into place. All right, so I've set the lower structure of the tree. We've got almost the entire thing set up here, but I want to walk you through what I've done thus far. As always, we're going to start with the lowest directional branch on the tree, setting that first, and then working our way in and up towards the apex. So on the far left side of the tree there, we've got our directional branch down here. As of right now, it's relatively small. There's not a lot of foliage out at the end down there, but what I've done is allowed the tips to remain. So that's going to draw a lot of energy out to the end of that branch. Once I see some extension growth on the end of that branch over the next couple of months here, I'll then cut that back. What that'll do is it'll remove the native auxin or growth hormone that's in the very tips out there. It'll force the cytokinin that's locally biosynthesized within the branch to actually enter into the side branching or the back budding that's already on the tree and force that auxin to then activate in those areas, so we'll get growth in those portions of the plant. So in other words, allowing the shoots to grow at the end, you get energy pulled out, you get hormone transfer within that branch, cut those tips off, that hormone then gets redirected into the lateral branches, we get more back budding on the plant, the back buds that are already there will fill in more, and we'll have more foliage by the time this tree goes dormant later in the fall this year. So the next thing I did, of course, is to set some of the interior branches moving up into the tree. And we're just working on the primary lines right now on the plant, so I'm really not wiring much, if any, of the secondary branches, and there really are no tertiary branches to work with at this point. This is just basic structural setup on the tree. So I'm looking to create side-to-side movement, a little bit of motion up and down, trying to keep the future padding of the tree in mind. And I've already been able to pad this out just a little bit here. But again, as this fills out over the next 3, 4, 5 months before it goes dormant, it's going to have much more branching to work with, and then those pads will really start to form and be visible when you're looking at the tree from the front view. Now, I'm going to rotate the tree a little bit here so you can see we're trying to keep this as three-dimensional as possible. So I took a lot of branches that were coming up and forward towards the front and laid them back towards the rear. Cool thing about junipers is you can actually rotate the branches 180 degrees and you don't have to worry about the branch dying. Particularly if you wire it correctly, make sure that wire is nice and tight and you're rotating it in the direction that you applied the wire. So again, if you applied the wire clockwise, you want to rotate that branch clockwise. If you wired it counterclockwise, you want to rotate it counterclockwise. That'll help that wire stay tight around that branch. And if you do it slowly throughout the branch rather than just doing it all at once in one location, you shouldn't have any breakage and the branch should survive just fine. So you can see from here, we've got a lot of three-dimensionality back here. Again, a lot of these tips back here, particularly some of these here that I'm trying to have wrap around the backside of the tree to give us more depth. I've left those tips on there for the same reason that I left the tips on our main branch down here, or our directional branch. So the final thing that we have to do now is set the apex on the tree, and that's going to be this guy right here. What I typically do with almost every tree, whether it's a Yamadori like this that's really old, has a lot of character to it, or if it's just a beginner tree that you pick up at a Lowe's or a Home Depot, is to take what is the apex here, so these guys here are technically our apex, wrap that around, lower these guys down to become a lateral branch, then all of this growth right through here that are lateral branches at this moment will become the apex. So I'm gonna loop this around, show you exactly what I'm talking about here. I think it'll make a bit more sense once you see it actually done. So this is the completion of the first iteration styling on this Kishu Shimpaku grafted onto a Sierra Juniper Yamadori trunk. Now, over the course of the next few months leading up to fall, like I said before, this will fill in significantly more. So leading up to that, what I'm gonna do again is allow all the shoots to elongate. We'll cut them back here probably in about 2 months from now. They will then flush out one more time internally, so it'll have a much fuller appearance by the time it goes dormant later this fall. We're also going to continue fertilizing this tree pretty heavily for the rest of this growing season. I'm using something here called Grow Power, which is a 12-8-8, so 12 nitrogen, really high nitrogen. It's gonna push a lot of growth between now and when it goes dormant, which is exactly what I want. I wanna pump up the health, get it healthy, get it growing really nice so that next spring we can actually pot this guy up in a new container. Now I'm also gonna put this tree back out on the bench under 30% shade cloth just to give it a little bit of respite from the hot sun. So this styling in this video was done in early August, so it's basically the hottest month of the year here in Nashville, Tennessee, so this definitely needs to go under some shade over the course of the rest of the growing season. We're also going to be misting the foliage on this tree twice a day, once in the morning, once in the late afternoon, way before it gets a dark enough time for that to evaporate so we don't run into fungal issues with the plant as well. And then again, like I said, next spring this will go in a new container. Now out on the bench, we're going to be setting it up on this angle here so it adjusts to its new growing pattern and position. not a problem at all. If some of the soil starts to wash away, we'll cover this with some mesh to keep this on here so we don't have a lot of erosion over the next few months leading up to its repotting next February or March. Now the style of pot that we're going to be putting this in next spring will be a rinka pot, so sort of a round kind of flowery shaped pot. I think it's going to look really good for this tree. It's going to make the trunk look nice and fat. That extended branch on the far left side there will hang outside of the pot, so it'll be basically a semi-cascade style tree. Now up at the top of the plant here, I wanted the highest point on the tree to be this jin right here. So this is what's called a tenjin in Japanese, so an apical jin. It's the highest point on the tree. So I wanted to make sure that that apex was lower than that jin. Now the apex itself looks a little bit sparse at this moment, but that's completely normal for the first iteration styling. As we've discussed in other episodes of Bonsai-U, most of the trees we work with are apically dominant, so that apex is going to fill in very quickly relative to the lower branches. So again, within probably 1 year from now, we should have a really nice full canopy at the top of the tree that will match the density on the rest of the plant. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Bonsai-U. Make sure to like and subscribe, and of course share this video. That helps us out with the algorithm on YouTube. And if you really like what we do here, you can donate to help Bonsai-U going forward. There's a link in the description down below. You can donate $1, $5, or however much you like. Every little bit helps us. We do all these videos in-house ourselves, all the filming, all the editing, all the production, all the writing. So any support you can give us, we truly appreciate it. Once again, thank you so much for checking out this episode, and we'll see you guys next time around. Take care.